Hi. It's really nice to see everybody, and really nice to be here with you. And really nice to have a chance to practice this together. My name is Fusho, for those that I haven't met. And we do this ceremony once a month, this atonement ceremony. And it can seem a little involved, but I find once you kind of just get into it more and more and let it flow, the more wonderful it becomes, really. So what is it we're doing? What is it we're doing here? And this idea of atonement can mean a lot of things to different people. But for us, it means this is an opportunity to be at one with everything that's happening in our life and in the world. So we think about precepts and ways of being in the world, but not so much as rules. This being at one with means to really turn towards, as opposed to, oh, this is the rule that I'm supposed to follow, and that might mean I can't be this way, whatever that rule in our mind is, which often brings up a lot of kind of rejection, ideas of rejection, pushing away. I find that this process of examining, being at one with, is the opposite of pushing away, or an opposite of separating ourselves. So instead of saying, that's bad, what's wrong with me? Why am I doing that? I shouldn't do that. It's an opportunity to really look a lot deeper and say, what is that thing that's within me that I recognize in other people? What is that? Where's that coming from? How can I work with it and acknowledge it and understand that it's in me as just like it's in everybody else, right? And so I'm not separate if I'm not holding myself out and saying, oh, I'm doing the right thing or the wrong thing. But if I'm looking at, what is this here? What's this story? And can I look even deeper than that story? Can I let go of the story and say, what's really happening? And why am I responding in this particular way? I find that process is very different than sort of beating ourselves up or clinging to an idea of right and wrong, good and bad, whose side, what side we're on. So during the ceremony, we think about being one with, and we atone for all evil karma, which is what I was just sort of talking about, which is ever committed by me since of old, which is acknowledging that I'm not separate from anything that's ever happened. Even the wars and the horrible, the genocides and on, the horrors that we know are happening. It's a way to look at it and say, do I have those aspects that have caused this within me, the way all of us do? And I loved what Miyoko Roshi said about the precepts when we're looking at them. I like that she said we can consider them as a doorway. More than rules, they're like a doorway that we can go through if we're open to it. Or like a flashing light, that says, hey, turn it around, turn that light around, go through that door. But the doorway is looking this way, not out and saying, you're wrong, what you did is bad. It's looking this way and saying, do I have that in me? And we take refuge here when we do that, right? When we let that story go and we examine these doorways, we're able to come home. And so that's the study of the precepts is Jukai, which is coming up this summer. So we'll do a more intensive study of all of the precepts, which we do that once a year. And then some people take refuge through a ceremony in the studying the precepts through the Jukai ceremony. But here we also examine one of the precepts once a month, just to keep them, in our mind, and to keep thinking about different doorways we could go through, so that we can be more present in our life and work to save all sentient beings. Maizumi Roshi said that the Kai is really to be aware of your own nature. So when we're studying this and we're letting the stories go and we're thinking about precepts, we're investigating ourselves and our nature instead of pretending that that doesn't apply to us, or, oh, I could never do that, I'm a terrible person. Let's just investigate it. Let's take a look, as deeply as we can. So one of the study texts that we use for Jukai is Diane Eshin's Rosetto's Waking Up to What You Do. You can find it. And we have a few different study texts we use when we're studying Jukai, but it's a nice, down-to-earth book that talks about working with precepts in our daily life. I think it's a really nice one. I like it. And the beginning of the book, she includes a quote from the Dhammapada from the Buddha. It says, the thought manifests as the word manifests as the deed develops into habit, and the habit into character. So watch the thought and its ways with care, and let it spring from love, born out of concern for all beings. As the shadow follows the body, as we think, so we become. And Charlotte Joko Beck wrote the introduction in Waking Up to What You Do. Rosetto, she was her teacher. And she says we must all engage in events as they unfold in our lives. But we have a choice to do this with either intelligence or ignorance. And the precepts presented, that we're studying are guidelines to help us tap the intelligence that's already there within us. It's just a reminder once a month that this is already here. It's already there. If we can just look back down there, we can realize, oh, it was already there. The right way to be or behave or respond. It's actually in here. It's not out there. So I thought we would look at the sixth grave precept. I've just really been thinking about not discussing the faults of others. Because I think we're drowning culturally in this human way that I think is in our DNA. I really was thinking, how do we not discuss the faults of others? I think it's like a deep, deep longing, for me anyway, but I think we have it from the time we're very little. We want to talk about others' faults and disparage. And we have to be taught not to, in fact, not to do that, and that it's harmful. And I think the reason we might want to talk about other people's faults, I think it's a longing to belong. We have a tribal longing, and we want to find our people, all of us. And so that's one way that we feel, oh, we can find our people if we agree, and we can point our finger at these other people. Feels good, right? If we're talking together. And it's like it's culture everywhere you look. It's part of culture, negative and positive, right? The Yiddish term, I believe, for that is called a kibbutz. You have a little chat, you do some talking. You want to see what's up, who said what to who, and what you think about that. And did you see what they were doing? And did you hear that? And can you believe what they wore? But I was thinking, I have a memory from when I was about 5 years old. I have this memory, and I don't know how it all actually went, but I was in kindergarten, and I was just getting acclimated. We were in school. And I have this vision of this very tall person who was the teacher getting upset because it was playtime and said, I don't want to hear one more person say something mean about anybody else or you're going to be in trouble. And I turned to my friend who I was really excited to be with, who I remember wanting to be my best friend, and said, look at his funny hat, in a really mean way. And the teacher said, you're going to the principal's office. And I don't know, and I remember thinking, she just said, I shouldn't say that, and I couldn't help myself. I was really happy. I wanted my friend to see that guy's funny hat. And I didn't understand where it came from or why I said that. And then being on the other side of it, I know we've all had those experiences that stay with us, right? I mean, I have childhood memories of being teased, of running funny. And I probably was in second grade and somebody was making fun of the way I was running. I still think about that when I'm running. It stayed with me. So, I don't think that person probably even would remember saying that. But it really stayed with me. And I think that we can say, oh, what's the harm in a little gossip? It doesn't seem like as serious of a thing as, say, killing or something like that, right? But I actually think that is what leads to killing and civil wars and disastrous cultures falling apart. We have a culture that wants to make other faults, make people feel like they're wrong, we're right, their faults are something we should disparage and criticize. We have a president who's made a career out of that. I mean, that's his MO. We have now a media culture, 24 hours, 7 days a week that does that spends their time saying they're wrong. We have social media platforms everywhere for us to say, you're wrong, look, you're wrong, you're wrong, and to disparage and to gossip. And we're seeing teenagers on social media who are being disparaged by their friends commit suicide. I was thinking about this film. We don't have time to go into it, but it's a great film. The Banshees of Inisherin. It's by Martin McDonagh, and it was a couple years ago. And it's set in it's a fictional tiny little island off of Ireland, but the backdrop of the film is the Irish Civil War. And the story is about two friends that, long-time friends that have the same thing they do every day. They've been together forever. And one day, one friend just decides, I'm over you, I'm done with you, you're dumb. And he tells everyone, I don't want anything to do with him. He's boring and stupid. And they have this, this fallout, and it just escalates and escalates and escalates to the point where the one friend who says, I don't want you to talk to me anymore, he says, he's a fiddler. And he says, if you do, and the other friend says, what's wrong? Can't we work this out? Can't we work this out? And he says, no, I'm done with you. You're dumb. I want to be on my own. I want to go. He's a fiddler. He says, I want to make music, and I want to spend the rest of my life doing something worthwhile. Stay away from me. But he won't. But the friend won't let it go, and he keeps coming up and says, "Come on, we can work this out." And the fiddler says, "If you bother me one more time, I'm going to cut off one of my fingers." And he does it. And so it escalates, and then they keep going back and forth, and then the other friend has a pet donkey, and that donkey ends up swallowing one of one's fingers and dying. It's a dark comedy. And they get to this breaking point where they go too far and they can't make up. And when the donkey dies, the other friend stops trying to make up with him. And he says, "I'll never forgive you. I'm going to burn your house down." And he does. And the guy, luckily, is not in the house. But the guy says, "Okay, we need to make up now." And the other one who burned the house down says, "It's too late." The fiddler ends up cutting off all of his fingers in spite. So, and the house, and burns everything to the ground. Everything's burnt to the ground. And there's no going back. And the civil war is coming to an end, and they say, "Do you think the fighting will stop?" And they say, "No, I think there's going to always be something to fight about. Some things you just can't move past." I know it's a little dark. So how do we stop from getting to that point? I think we sit on the cushion, we bow, we take refuge here, we let the story go, we turn the light towards ourselves, and we look really closely and say, okay, so where is that piece of me that enjoys this gossip, and why is that? What is that? What am I afraid of? Why am I separating myself? What's underneath that? Right? Why am I afraid to belong? What if what's the worst that could happen? I know how I felt when I was made fun of. So why would I do that to somebody else if I could help it, right? I remember that feeling of those words that stayed with me this whole time. So maybe I can take a minute before I indulge in this sort of gossipy fault finding and just pause and realize that we all have these flaws or these faults all together. We're not separate. We share them. That's something we share. And they can be really harmful, right? So finding fault with ourselves can be really harmful, and that's in turn how we relate to others. So if we can just set everything down and really just say, oh, this thought, how I see myself or how I see that person, doesn't have to go in that direction. It doesn't have to go there, right? We could have openness. We don't have to hold on so tightly to what this fear is or what this idea is. We could allow room for somebody to change, including ourselves, so that we can support each other instead of this, pointing. I'll finish with that one again really quick. The thought manifests as the word manifests as the deed develops into habit, and the habit into character. So watch the thought and its ways with care, and let it spring from love, born out of concern for all beings. As the shadow follows the body, as we think, so we become.